Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Media Show on the Pod TV Network. Today we're going to be discussing the hot topics. Of course, I was heated up earlier today listening to Rex Lee talk about the cyber security issues, and now I'm starting to change my mind. Maybe we do need regulations with what's going on there. But we're going to hear from our panelists. We're going to bring in Kim Calhoun from the United States of America, Shaquille Latmer from Australia, and Mark Lee, who's the brother of Rex Lee from Durham, North Carolina. That was kind of eye-awakening. I mean, I don't want more regulations because I just get really sick and tired of that. But at the same time, these big companies have unbelievable control over the media industry. And when Rex was ramming into, remember, we've been banned by Facebook. I mean, we've been thrown off. They destroyed one of my websites. I mean, and there's nothing you can do about it. Same with what's the other one? YouTube, same thing. I mean, as you go through all the major social media sites, they operate as, with impunity because they can. For the most part, they're good, but I don't know.
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to be the consumer themselves as well. I come from the utility industry, spent many years there, helped developing what it became as far as, the fiber networks, broadband, the interconnect ways to it and access to it. One of the things that bothered me, as well as Rex, who comes from the older days of telecom, is the fact that when the internet came, regulations started to turn its head towards a lot of things in the best interest of the growth of the web. So I think that, they turned their head to something that they regulated for many years. They held our toes to the fire. Like we couldn't cross anything. I mean, that you couldn't make a mistake without them coming after you and finding you. But they completely turned their heads, and we were there when it happened. Many of us kept trying to advocate at least better regulatory standards to protect people and their privacy. But there is no privacy. When you buy your phone, Nick, the first thing you did was waive all your rights to everyone on that phone, not just the people who are, your contacts, but all the apps that are on that phone. And if you look, when you buy the phone, Rex can teach you about this very well. There are apps that are embedded on the phone that immediately take all of your data and send it to whoever made the phone, whether it be China, India, Mexico, other, countries that don't like us. So you gave up your rights and it did so willingly so that you could have a cell phone.
But then on the other hand is this, okay? These people that want to, quote, protect their privacy, if you're doing nefarious acts, then you want your privacy protected. But why haven't you're not? So I don't really care that much because I'm not doing anything that's...
Well, I'm not doing anything wrong either, but now they have means to twist the truth, take your data, manipulate it, make it look like, your photo was with someone or your video is on your phone. Right. I mean, there's just so much wickedness now that, I'm almost in agreement with some of the engineers I've worked with for years. I just want to go back to an old flip phone. It has nothing but my number and your phone number.
They're doing that right now, which Mark may be familiar with on sports. You get, they're using artificial intelligence to talk, and like they'll say, I think Tom Brady is the horrible thing, blah, blah, blah. And it's not the person, his mouth is moving, but they're inserting all these words that this person obviously would never say. So they would say our teammates are bad, blah, 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 blah. So right now, even on the internet, there is a lot of stuff going on where they're stealing people's name, images, and likeness and using AI, making them say things like, Georgia Southern's the worst football team, and he's the Georgia Southern coach. He's saying it's the worst football team. I got a bunch of losers on it. He's not saying it, but they're doing AI to say it. And I'm watching this, I'm going, it's fascinating because they're basically putting words in people's mouth.
NIL has become a big industry. And because, as a matter of fact, I know that one of our shows is very big on that because the Pull Up Podcast, which we air here on Pod TV coach Tony is actually with his Rise Corporation, is actually in the NIL business. So he's actually working with a lot of athletes and I think some entertainers to create NIL, which is name, image, and likeness for these athletes so that they can make some money even before they make it to the pros and everything. And you are right, there are some people that are trying to figure out stopgaps to make sure that they aren't stolen those NIL images and that other people aren't exploiting it. You can have people exploiting it, as Rex was saying earlier, a number of things, and a lot of people aren't necessarily doing nefarious acts. And then you also have to ask your question as to what is a nefarious act for some may not be a nefarious act for others. I mean, that's that whole conversation about one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter and everything. But I had the pleasure this past weekend of meeting an early pioneer, even more earlier than the Facebook guys and all along those lines. And you may know him because he is now a motivational speaker. So I'm going to read a little bit about what he said on his blog and see if y'all agree with what he said or not. But I had the pleasure of meeting Seth Godin, who lost a lot of his money as one of the founders of Yahoo. And y'all may have met Seth before. He's out of New York and all along those lines. But he said in an authoritarian environment, gatekeepers and censorship ensure that the culture changes very slowly. This includes the most scientific journals, large organizations, and spectrum-limited forms of media. This is a country with state-controlled media, but it's also a community where the people who are most fearful of change also have power. If there are only a few TV channels or radio stations, the programmers are going to become conservative because they don't want to lose a market share. If the cost of being seen as too edgy is perceived as very high, the gatekeepers will stay in the center. The Billboard Top 40 and pop music exists because a jukebox couldn't hold every record, and radio stations didn't want to risk being a listener who wanted to hear what everyone else was listening to. And then he also brought up something that we talked about quite a bit as well, which is algorithm. So he says you can probably see where this is here. Heading, the newspapers and the radio stations determine the algorithm. A few surprising items, but mostly the center. And then the media and they immediately turn the algorithm inside out. They tweak what gets promoted and spread based on what it's likely to grab our attention, play with our emotions, and to generate outrage or surprise. To do this without regard to the truth or the stress that the idea might cause. They simply want to drive short-term attention. And I would add to that algorithm. So he says the fringe, that's where the outrage and fear and novelty lie. And so creators of content responded. They discovered that in order to get the attention they craved, they had to run from the center and toward the edges, even if they didn't believe in what they were saying, or especially them. So he was actually saying that some of these fringe folks are actually saying things that they may not even believe themselves, but they're just trying to get the attention and drive those ideas of what we were talking about. So any thoughts about Seth is saying?
But it actually does work. The other day I was looking on Facebook and they had a headline, Chuck Norris just died. Okay. So I was going like, wow, he's a big karate guy, big famous actor, and it wasn't true. But it's clickbait. I'm wondering if that stuff is legal, so I'll ask Professor Adam Lamparello. I know that ByteDance is going to court apparently because they're going to pull they're trying to pull their plug. But you just said that perhaps they're not protected under the First Amendment. And how does that argument go?
I'll be back in like 30 seconds, so don't take me backstage because then I'll be stuck back there.
Okay. Won't do.
Well, the First Amendment only applies to state actors, government actors. And if it does, the protections of the First Amendment are so robust that there is really not much that can be done to prohibit or regulate speech that's harmful. Cases such as Snyder versus Phelps, Citizens United versus FEC, Hustler versus Falwell, Texas versus Johnson, and United States versus Stevens have all established this. So there's basically only three or four limitations on the First Amendment. The first is obscenity. Under Miller versus California, speech that has no literary, scientific, or artistic value and that appeals to a sexual interest, namely child pornography, can be prohibited. Fighting words under Brandenburg versus Ohio are prohibited. That's when you incite someone to imminent unlawful action. And terroristic threats are not permitted. And fourth, defamation, as we see in cases like New York Times versus Sullivan. So my answer to your question is, given that the limitations on free speech are so narrow and the protections so robust, there is really no First Amendment protections against harm or misinformation.
Okay. Yeah, Rick.
Adam asked a question about an hour ago in an earlier show. How does early voting in this election compare to early voting in 2020? So I've got kind of a statistic. It's hard to do a day by day comparison, but as of today, 4.6 million people have voted early. That's about 3% of what's going to be the total number of voters. In 2020, that number at the same time was closer to 9 million. So about half as many people have voted early.
Well, I'm not sure why.
In there for Adam, because it says that somebody named Jillian Becker has said it is great to see Adam. He adds substance to the media show, so he's got a fan there and everything. I don't know if this is one of his students or one of his fan base family members, but somebody is a fan of Adam. So Adam,
it's totally artificially intelligence based. I believe what happened was that I think Rex Lee, using his CyberTalk AI, just stuck some people in there to become Adam's fans, and that's really what's going on, Mark.
It's okay, guys. You can be okay with people liking me.
Well, it's a computer that likes you. I think.
Hey,
I think
does it matter these days?
No, it doesn't. Apparently not.
But speaking of that, I saw this crazy statistic, and Rick, this is going to something that you talk about and everything. It was a graph, and it was a very scary graph. I wish I had pulled it out, but because it would make better looking if I just versus describing it if y'all showed it. But it was the way that people met, and your choices were like through family, through church, through school, through online and everything. And then like in the early the 1970s, online was like way down there. It was like maybe 10% and everything. And by the time
online didn't exist in the 70s.
Well,
everybody, I worked in bars in the 80s, and that's where
but it was after COVID, because like I said, you can see the graph. I might try to pull it up and maybe even bring it up at some point and everything. But by like around 2024, it was pretty much the majority of the people, like I would say close to like 80 to 90% were meeting through online sources. Because what the graph was showing was that people were getting frustrated because they weren't meeting in person. They didn't have that person-to-person contact. Because the majority of people, even in their dating life, were meeting in this whole notion of meeting through the online sources, whether that was ER.
All right, here's a crazy statistic. If you look at marriages that happened in the 1920s, 100 years ago, the average distance between the two people growing up was a quarter mile.
Right.
So people they marry, everybody's living in Brooklyn, basically. They all work in butcher shops, and somebody knows somebody, and they get set up, and people had no, reach back then. It was all word of mouth and somebody's neighbor and your church or your synagogue. And that's how, and now for better or for worse, and in a lot of ways it's for worse that we can shop among millions of people. My wife and I watched a reality dating show where 5 European millionaire soccer stars were hooked up with women, and nobody could make a couple, even though these were like the greatest guys in the world, rich, famous, like abs forever, because they're soccer players. But no, everybody's expectations have been raised so high by the dating market, where you can just shop among so many people that people won't settle for anybody. And so
I'm gonna object to that comment from the royalty lines, which are my lines. I have to say they actually, the marriages were big distances because the royals would have to marry another royal from a different house. So that's the reason Henry married Catherine of Aragon, which is not even close. And same with Edward married Isabella. I mean, what you see in the royalty tracts, that's not true. They actually married for long distance. But I do agree.
You guys were privileged. You
exactly,
royals.
And I totally agree. My ancestors were privileged, and I agree with that. But when it comes to the commoners, I would agree with you. The commoners married their next door neighbor because they didn't have the financial stability to move around and intermarry, nor were they forced to intermarry because of wars. The main reason they did those intermarriages is to purportedly prevent wars. And also, they considered themselves to be elite.
There's one more pernicious influence on people hooking up today, which is just porn everywhere. You touch your
Oh,
computer.
it's on Facebook.
Yeah, it vomits up 1,000 pictures
Yeah,
of people who are naked with perfect bodies. And now
Yeah.
with AI, they have even more perfect bodies. And then so when you get somebody to your condo or your apartment or your parents' basement and they take their
Yeah.
clothes off, you're like, well, you don't look like the
Oh.
AI ladies with.
Well, that's because America also has a big obesity rate. Now, in Spain, it's much less. But part of it is this, and Adam will love this one. It's because your doctors beat you up if your BMI is high. When I first moved over here, I told them what my height and weight was. They go, no, it can't be. Okay. And I thought, wait a minute. This is like every American. No. Over here in Spain, we need to get your BMI down, baby. And so everywhere you go, just hit it, Mark. Everywhere you go, there's.
No, I hear you, but Nick, you're a Mormon.
There's only one place in Spain you're going to find fat people. And
no, but I got a question.
Costco.
I got a legitimate question to ask all the
Costco,
people here.
which has
probably going to get our media show
and
in trouble and everything. But I got a legitimate question to ask everybody here and everything. Because one of the things that I would agree with you, Rick, and maybe just as you get older, your idea of what beauty is changes as well and everything. And I'm not going to be a prude and say that I have never looked at such a sites and everything. But I don't necessarily think, and Adam, I don't know if you're going to agree with me. I don't know if Shaquille, if you're going to agree with me. Rick, you've admitted that you watch some of this stuff as well as everything. But some of these women are not the most beautiful women at everything. I mean, they are doing an act that is probably part of the reason that you're watching some of these things.
Okay, all right. There used to be a principle. There used to be a principle that how nasty you got in porn was inversely proportional to how beautiful you were. The most beautiful naked models became Playboy playmates, and they didn't even show pubes until 1970. They were always turned away. They had pubes, but you never saw them because they were turned away from the camera. They would only show their butts and their boobs. But if you worked all your way down to people who did, butt stuff in the 70s, those were not the most attractive models. Now there's been a leveling where, there's less shame associated with porn. We have 1.1 million OnlyFans models. That's as many people. There are as many people showing their parts on OnlyFans as there are doctors. More people than there are cops in the U.S. So the shame has gone away. So, all right.
Rick, I have a question for you. Are you privileged?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, for one thing, I was lucky enough to be born, with like this ridiculous IQ, which through no, I didn't do anything to get it. And so that, for good and for ill, because I come up with all sorts of dumb ideas that get me in trouble, but it generally, it's been an advantage. And yeah,
Hey, Rick,
I've got lots of different, like, specific privilege. Like, I have two families because my parents got divorced and remarried. So in one family, I only have one sibling. The way to have generational wealth is to have small numbers of kids, so they don't fight over the. Plus, my parents were small business people and an accountant and very financially prudent. So,
but how did you get to work on the Jimmy Kimmel show? How was it that you got hired? What did you do to get
all right, okay, so here's the deal. So I didn't like the person I was in high school because I was a virgin. I was bad with girls. I couldn't talk. So I went back to high school several times. And the last time I graduated, I was very old for high school, in my 20s. And MTV was looking for teens. I was living in New York City. They were looking for teens to be trial contestants on a quiz show. And I had fake ID left over from high school saying that I was still a teen. So I showed up there and I played the game, and I loved the people. They were funny, and I'm like, can I work for you? And you don't have to pay me. And that's how MTV ran, on interns. So that was Lucky Break 1. Lucky Break 2 was I was a fact checker. The head writer fell in love with the other fact checker, made her a writer. and couldn't make her a writer without making me a writer, so I got to be a writer. Okay, lucky break 2. Lucky break 3 is my writing partner was writing on a terrible ESPN sports quiz show, and he was hitting on the females, the Vanna White of the show. He was, because he hit on everybody. He was just, and her boyfriend saw what was going on and decided to stop it. He was a William Morris agent, and he correctly decided that my writing partner would quit trying to have sex with his girlfriend if he made us clients, because having an agent is like worth gold. And so we got to have a William Morris agent, which was huge. But we were little baby clients. You know, we never made anything. And when you're a little baby who hasn't done anything, you get sent out on assignments as favors to your big clients. Okay, so we got sent out to do an afternoon of talking over ideas for a talk show for 2 soap opera stars. They needed several funny people to come up with funny ideas. And it was me, and it was my writing partner, and it was some guy who'd never done any TV named Jimmy Kimmel. Insane, crazy.
He came out when he was being basically discovered himself and everything. I do have a question, because I love when you look at this, and I'm going to say this, Adam, you'll love this, because I used to be involved in, and I think I mentioned it a couple of times in the early days of Pod TV with Daybreakers and all along those lines, which as those morning house parties, and they were doing it online during the early days of the pandemic and everything. But they're coming to my town. So Nick, I hate to tell you, you left town too early, but they're going to have a Get Out the Poll event, and it's going to be taking place on this coming Thursday in the morning, because a lot of times these are morning events, and they're going to have a TikTok celebrity DJ, Brindisi, who I've never heard of, but I guess I'll find out who he is on Thursday. But they're having food, drinks that are free and on them, and they're going to have polls with a brass band, but they're also going to have pole dancers. So I know that if you were here, Rick, you would be involved in this, because there's going to be pole dancers there as well. But this is their effort to get out the vote and everything. And a lot of these organizations claim to be nonpartisan and trying to get out votes just in general. So I don't know if they're in a specific side and everything, but they're
Rick, the one thing I'd say to you is the concept of privilege has taken a real beating lately and had such negative connotations. I strongly suspect that it wasn't just your IQ, but it was some choices that you made and some talents you exhibited in your writing that are responsible for your success. And that's why I don't look at privilege in a negative way, because it's not causally related to success.
Well, I'll say that in Spain, they say you get to move to a, quote, privileged community. So it doesn't have the same negativity as they do in the the States.
Well, you're privileged because you earned your privilege.
The issue is what happens.
Why do you have to earn your privilege? I don't
a couple of things. One, there is a show
you don't have
on the network that used to talk all the time about the concept of genius is common, which is this notion. Bruce Joyce talks about it. You can find him on YouTube, that we all have a genius, that we all are privileged in one side or another, because we all have a skill or something that we are special at and everything. And hopefully you can make that privilege make you some money. One of the other things that I think Seth Godin was saying, I don't know necessarily that you were going to agree with this, or even Shaquille would agree with this, because he made some money in the past off of being a hedge fund investor, but he's of the opinion that people in general don't want to be entrepreneurs. They want to be freelancers, because freelancers, you're actually in control of your money, whereas as an entrepreneur, you sometimes have some controls put on you and everything. So he actually made that statement at the Social Work Wealth Conference, which I think surprised a lot of people, because they would think they want to be entrepreneurs. And he was like, no, you don't want to be an entrepreneur. You want to be in control of what you're doing, and that's what you want to be.
Jack, what do you think?
Well,
he just wants to have money.
Well, about what? I mean, I went to respond to something only 6 hours ago. I'm going to just respond to what was talked about. I don't care if you guys think the topic's.
Wait,
Where'd he go?
Oh, where's your good?
Where'd he go?
There he is.
There he is. He's down the corner.
He
I did not
disappeared.
do anything to you, Shaquille. That was the computer that bounced.
You bleeped off.
Go ahead. What do you
Bleeped
say,
off down
Shaquille?
there. Okay,
Go ahead,
Shaquille, you're
Shaquille.
back.
In relation to tech and the Bill of Rights, I believe, Adam, that the law is completely wrong on these issues, because I can't imagine if I came to America and set up a company that I could say to my employees or to my customers that, hey, you can come and buy my product, but in order to do so, you have to give up your First Amendment rights, or you have to give up your Second Amendment rights, or you've got to give up your Fourth Amendment rights to due process. Or if I ask you a question that could be incriminating to you, you've got to give up your Fifth Amendment rights. Or if you're an employee of mine and you come in late for work, I can hang you upside down and boil you alive in hot oil because you have to sign away your Eighth Amendment rights to cruel and unusual punishment. So I don't understand the legal logic behind allowing tech companies who are largely a public utility at this point. People need to use this, the technology that they have, and they're allowed to get away with doing that. So I think that that's atrocious. We briefly touched on. I haven't finished, please.
Okay.
We briefly touched on censorship and and that sort of stuff. But I'll continue to make the claim that whilst Republicans do use tech companies to some degree, and the Trump campaign did that, it is Democrats in general that abuse the power that tech companies have in order to do their bidding that they couldn't do themselves. And I think that's atrocious. But to that end, there's been a lot of conversation that we've had over the last week or so about FEMA, about their response, and about the criticism. And what I've heard back from people is it's just a big right-wing conspiracy theory. So I'm going to ask Mark, I sent you a video earlier on your WhatsApp. I'm going to ask you to share that. And I'm sorry, Jillian Baker, whoever you may be, AI or otherwise, I'm sure you're a real person because Adam is wonderful. But I suspect that you and anybody else who's watching will be absolutely horrified and incensed by exactly the sort of things that FEMA prioritizes. And if we can see them doing this, what are we not seeing other agencies do? So can you play that for us, please, Mark?
Get it up. I'm going to send it myself so we can set it up. I have not done that yet and everything. But a quick question while I'm doing this, and I'm doing it as we're talking, because you kind of brought it up, and this is actually for Adam and everything. Because I want to say that North Carolina is a right-to-work state, which means that literally somebody can walk into the office and decide that they don't like beards that day and decide that they want to fire me, and I would have no recourse and everything, because I think that if I understand the right,
but why should you have any recourse? Rick, I don't understand you, Rick. I love you so much, man. I think you're such an amazing person. But I don't understand your logic on things. I can't understand how you can support the Democrats at this point. Your parents come from a small business background, right?
Yeah.
So they come from a small business background. So it means that they probably don't want too much government regulation in their lives. You then start your career by working for free, by offering to work for free in order to gain experience, which then led to a career. But labor laws now would say you're not allowed to do that. Well, so basically, young people today, if a young person came to me, let me just finish my sentence here. If a young person came to me and said to me, "Hey, you're a hedge fund manager, you're a former hedge fund manager, and I'd like to learn from you. Can I just, tail along with you and learn what I can learn from you?" I can't let them do that because guess what? That's how I started. I started by hassling people. I was on the phone ringing up stockbrokers, ringing up bankers and hassling them until I wore them out. And they said, "Oh, look, shut up. Just come in and shut up." And that's how I learned a lot of things I learned. You can't do that anymore. So these right to work laws, look, Mark, if the employer doesn't want you there, go get another job.
So
they're not obligated to employ you.
Specifically, hold on. Let me talk.
Jack is right on the law. That's what the law is.
All right. Let me talk specifically about showbiz internships. There was a crackdown probably 10 years ago now because of just insane abuses where people were working full-on jobs for years for nothing and being called interns. There were people who were accountants doing like 20, 30, 40 hours a week of accountancy for free and then, plus the other abuses, the sexual, and just anyway, there was a crackdown because there was a crazy amount of abuse of the intern system in showbiz. And yeah, it was tragedy. Hold on, that it screwed it up for this opportunity. So now I guess in most places you have to get paid, but freaking MTV, VH1, all of the Viacom networks, they ran off of unpaid labor, which was both great and also a little bit shitty.
No, hang on a minute.
Hold on a second.
Hang on a minute. No,
I just wanna
I want
make
to
sure
respond.
that-
Come
hold
on, I've barely spoken for 3 shows. Come on now.
Okay, go
Yeah,
ahead.
let
Because I
him
just had a
talk.
quick
Let him
question
talk.
for Adam.
Let the
Go
man
ahead.
talk. Go ahead.
Rick, that criticism of the media industry, okay, fine. I get where you're coming from. I'll leave the sexual stuff aside. That's not acceptable. But why do people put themselves through that? It's their choice. They don't have to sit there as an intern and work for so long, but why do they do it? Why do so many people go to California and work shitty jobs as a wait person or a server or whatever you call them now, right? Don't put me here by myself. Why do they go there? They go there because they're chasing the big dream.
Because
Why
it's
did the people
awesome,
go
because
why did people go to California in the first place? Because they were trying to get gold, and the vast majority of them failed, right?
Yeah.
What happens in the finance industry? People think that investment banking is full of class and elegance and all that bullshit. You want to try and get a job with an investment bank? You better have really great results, and you better know somebody, and that's just to get the internship. Then what they'll do is they'll interview you, okay? And if you pass the interview, which you're not going to find out for 6 months or a year, so now you're really desperate, you can't apply for a job with any other bank, then they offer you a contract. So now you're a contractor. You're not even an employee, right? You know how many hours you've got to do and how much hard work. But why do people do it? They make the choice to sacrifice the slow and steady, higher paying wage that they would get somewhere else for the chance to hit it big. And the people in the media industry, they're not just doing it out of altruism. They're not just sitting there being taken advantage of because what they want, everybody wants to be the next superstar. Every idiot that can't dance thinks that they're going to be the next Michael Jackson, right? So this is what's happening in the media industry, and the whole idea, these poor people, go do something else. In a free country, nobody forced you, unless you're a child star, nobody has forced you to go and be an intern for some company.
Yeah,
It's actually a
You asked
movie.
how I could be a Democrat, and let me.
I didn't ask you. I just said I'm shocked that you could be.
But I grew up in a Republican household.
Clearly, that's
Yeah,
what
my
it's
parents were
about.
like, every time Nixon got elected, my parents had a party. But everybody can come, whether you voted for Wallace or for Humphrey, and it was a more friendly thing. We weren't as divided. The debate certainly wasn't about more regulations versus less regulations, except in the specifics. My dad, a very, kind of a redneck Jew in Boulder, Colorado, just thought all the Democrats on the city council were assholes. He would drag our dog, Mitzi the poodle, onto the mayor's lawn so the dog would shit on the mayor's lawn until the mayor.
Can I assume that you would share your father's views if we were to look at something like the LA Board of Commissioners? You think that those mostly Democrats are a bunch of assholes too? Or do you think they're doing a good job for LA?
I've been in LA city government at a very low level, and it's insane how corrupt LA city government is.
Exactly my point. So why do you want more of it? Why do you want more of it? This is government people. This is what government people do, right? This is the difference between free market capitalism and government people.
That's exactly right.
Free market capitalism says that I can get rich if I provide you with a service or a good that you want, and you will voluntarily give me your money. Government people and crony capitalists, what they do is they say, I will give my money to the government. I will then get the government to take your money from you by force and give it to me, and then I'll give a fraction of that money back to the government. That's crony capitalism. Why would you want more of that?
That first part's not true.
Hold on. Let me respond.
Yeah.
This whole discussion is a fairly recent discussion. What the discussion?
No, it's not. Rickman's been talked about since JFK and Nixon days, and before that, we were talking about this for centuries. Adam Smith, Marx. We've been talking about this.
It wasn't what regular people talked about. What regular people talked about in Boulder, Colorado, in 1970 was the Vietnam War and whether hippies were a problem. It wasn't this big overarching philosophical thing. My dad had a huge problem with city government because they required him to put in fire sprinklers in his old circa 1880 building. And he's like, F you guys, this is going to cost me 25,000 or some, and he thought it was bullshit. And
So let me just say that I understand that what's happened here, right? We've got a generation of people with their free love and unshaved armpits driving around in their bloody combi vans, right? And smoking a bit of dope and everything else they're using, quaaludes and all that sort of stuff. Hating the fact that there's government out there forcing a war that America didn't need to be in, and then tells my generation and the generation younger than that they should grow up and have no sex because the college kids today are so scared of each other and so scared of the consequences. They're walking around like festal bloody virgins. So no sex, don't drink, don't do any drugs, and love your government. I don't know what the hell you guys were smoking back in your day, but I don't think that anybody. I mean, it must have been something pretty good to make you change from we hate the government and look at all the bullshit they've done by forcing us to go into wars and drafting us to go into this war to Vietnam to, actually, we love them. In fact, we want more of it.
Shaquille, first off, I'm here to play your video, but you're getting the whole point mixed up and everything. Because my dad, who is definitely very liberal, and some people would say even more liberal than I am, and everything, is been going against the government on several things. Even currently, he's been having. He's got a whole bamboo tree behind his backyard and everything. That I can show y'all the picture of it at some point and everything. And they definitely been fighting even with the government, and that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier, to get a particular park named after a particular hero from this community and everything. So definitely I would not say that he has not been fighting against the government even to this modern day and everything, and he doesn't necessarily have these viewpoints that you think that people on the left necessarily have.
The problem is the way that you want to enact laws. If I said to Rick, hey, listen, Rick, I'm working on a screenplay and I'm trying to be funny and I don't know if I'm being, can you work with me? And I go there. He says, look, I'll work with you, but help me out with a couple of things that I'm working on. Is he exploiting me because I'm not getting paid to help him do the thing that he's helping? And then he says to me, hey, Shaquille, can you help me learn how to trade the markets? And then we're exploiting each other, and we need government to step in and tell us both, like, oh, we're here to protect you. We're the good guys, right? Who does that? And in business, hang on a second. And in business, if two people get together and they say, hey, look, I'm thinking about starting this business. What do you reckon? Right? And they both put some money in, they both put their time in. Should the government come in and say, oh, you can't do that either? Because I can tell you what, if you run your own small business, most of the time, especially when you're first starting, you are the least paid person. You've got to pay all your staff, you've got to pay all your bills, you've mortgaged your house, you've got debt collectors ringing you up, you've got people saying, hey, you didn't pay your phone bill. You've got people saying, look, the electricity and the this and the that, you're risking your house being foreclosed on. And if by chance you happen to become successful, then you've got the Democrats to tell you didn't build that, somebody else built that, and if you live in California, we'll take half. Thank you very much. Yeah, give me a break.
False statements and everything.
By the way, that part is true.
I think that, but I did have a quick question for you, Adam, because I brought it up earlier, and Shaquille kind of like brushed it off and everything. So let me understand this correctly. If there is a Muslim brother, and I'm just using Muslims as an example, that is working for a company, and the company decides that they don't want to hire any Muslims for whatever reason, that they can go ahead and fire that Muslim brother because that's what the right to work states mean and everything. So
no, it doesn't. There's anti-discrimination rules that are already in place.
To answer your question, you are not allowed to discriminate on the basis of race, ethnicity, and in most jurisdictions, sexual orientation. So of course you can't do that. Apart from that, you are allowed to make choices about who you want to hire and fire, whether it's arbitrary. And I think that what Shaquille has been saying in the last 10 minutes reflects an underlying theme that is responsible for the success of most people, which is you rely on yourself and your choices, and you're not deterred by your circumstances to determine your destiny. You don't look to government to help you. You don't have a grievance mentality where you perceive yourself as a victim. You make choices. You have resilience, perseverance, and education, responsibility, and respect for yourself such that you can make the right choices and place the responsibility for happiness on yourself. And people who do that are successful. Those who look to the government to solve their problems or who have a victim mindset or not. And I think that's the theme underlying his comments. And when you look to a case
hold on, let me say something really quick.
I was just about to finish before I got cut off.
No, okay.
Let Adam finish. Let Adam finish.
No,
Adam, do you have some finishing statements?
Yeah,
all right. No, hold on. Let me just say.
Hold
what
on,
I'm gonna say. I
Rick,
agree
let him
with
finish.
Rick, it's Adam's turn. He ain't finished.
Go on.
Are you finished?
He's not finished. Adam, it's your turn.
He's not finished.
I just want to agree with Adam that
Please don't.
that if you don't suck, there's a corollary. I think that if you don't suck at what you
So
do,
stop waving your hands. It's distracting. Go on, Rick.
if you don't suck at what you do, you don't have to worry about like diversity programs because.
Oh, bullshit, Rick. Firstly, if you don't suck at what you do, maybe those interns at Hollywood will never make it, apparently. But secondly, what's this nonsense? You've got look, the United States is the most racist country I have ever been to in the Western world. But not because they're racist against people of color, because the way that they treat white people. It is disgraceful.
Okay,
if
I'm tired
any
of
other
seeing
category of people were treated the way whites are treated in the United States, there would be an absolute uproar about it.
Here we go.
And secondly, I'll just make the point, and Adam, I'm not sure, I believe I'm correct on this, but please correct me if I'm wrong. One of the other things that you're supposed to be protected against in the anti-discrimination rules is discrimination because of your political ideology.
No.
Is that not correct? Religious belief and political ideology, is that correct? So you're not supposed to, because you believe in Donald Trump, go to a restaurant and be thrown out. You're not supposed to have university places denied to you because you vote for the wrong side. Is that not correct? Why do we always say the Democrats do that?
Hold on.
Stop waving your hands. You're interrupting.
I haven't had a chance to talk. We're 42 minutes
You've been
in.
interrupting.
Well, how does that feel, Jacoby? How does that feel, Chad?
I've raised my hand for the past 10, 20 minutes.
How does that feel, Jacoby?
You interrupted me. You interrupted Chad. Enough.
So just to point out, right to work, yes.
You do that show after show. How does it feel?
Shut up. For a right to work state, you can actually arbitrarily fire somebody regardless of whatever it is. There are actual laws, the anti-discrimination laws. Adam spoke on that perfectly. That is what's there. However, it's tough to prove those anti-discrimination laws. So in a right to work state, being arbitrarily fired, you don't have to say why you fired them. So therefore, you can actually fire somebody just for being Muslim, just for being gay, just for being whatever. That's the problem with a right to work state. On top of that, that's where unions come into play, which help out blocking that. What you guys were talking about, Shaq, you were being very disingenuous in your argument, saying that, oh my gosh, if I'm talking to Rick and he's talking to me and he's trying to help me with this, am I exploiting him? That has nothing to do with the conversation dealing with what these protection laws are for. Absolutely nothing. So you're trying to play on this emotional idea, which is one thing the Republican Party is great doing at. You a nugget of truth, but then it blasted out on this crazy nonsense as if that's the way that the government is actually trying to work. Nobody, Adam, nobody, Shaq, is actually saying, hey, we need to love our government. Absolutely nobody's saying that. What we're saying, if you want to look at an analogy, it's sports. The government is the referee. The referee sets the rules and the bylaws that everybody on that same sport, be it basketball, cricket, football, soccer, whatever, that's what they play on. And if we cannot agree on those same rules and those rules are set to hold one group back more so than the other, then we need to fix those rules. And
that's exactly why you need to fix the rules holding back white people.
Shut up, Shaq. So your idea when you said that the U.S. is the most racist towards white people and all this bogus mess, well, are white people's paid 70% less on the dollar? Oh no, we're going to bring up these statistics. Whatever. No, it's been well documented. It's a fact.
Yeah, it's bullshit. It's not a fact. Stop passing stuff off as fact that aren't facts.
Please put them on mute.
You talk over me and say that if I tell lies, I'm not allowed to speak. So why shouldn't I be able to do the same thing back to you?
Nick,
And you're
Why should I be able to do the same thing back to you?
you put me on mute when I talk over top of people. So please put him on mute. Thank
Why shouldn't I be able to do the same thing that you do to me? Host, tell me why I can't.
Should put an
Nick,
end to
please
this.
put him on mute because I would like to finish my point. So again, when we talk about these regulations and things that need to be put in place to protect individuals from being exploited, used, overrun by other individuals, yes, it turns out to be those individuals that historically have been overrun and overlooked throughout this whole country, which both Shaq, you and Adam both agree that has happened. But for some odd reason, you tend to think that in the 50 years since the 70 years since the civil rights movement, all that's disappeared. Even though there was a Southern strategy, even though there was the whole stop and frisk and everything, all these different laws that have affected minority communities as well as women that have held these minority communities, women included, because that's a minority, considered a minority community, these individuals back. These are where these regulations come into play, which need to help out these individuals from not being exploited and taken advantage of. It is not it's racist against white people. It's sad the fact when you try and create equality is seen as racism.
And that is the victim mentality.
Right. Let me just say, I've asked for a video. I've asked for a video to be played. I've asked for a video to be played. Okay, hang on. I've asked for a video to be played, and Jacoby is going to want to respond to it. So I'd like that video to be played. And but we can't all speak. Let me respond to Jacoby, please.
Let Shaq go.
You want the video played?
Oh, that's really professional.
Can you just let me finish my sentence first? And Jacoby, stop jumping around like an idiot. I'm actually speaking straight to you. Oh, I would leave the show then. Fine. Moron. Now, this would be the same as a person who has a bad relationship with a woman 50 years ago and then saying, well, all women are terrible. I'm not, this is absurd. The idea that something that happened, most people in the United States never even went through the shit that you're talking about. This is stuff that happened hundreds of years ago. And then you would have taken out on people like myself, who also came from places where we were oppressed by the white Brits, and get told, well, you should come to America and align yourselves with these parties. Bullshit. We're not doing it. This is absurd. But as I said, when it comes to government and changing rules and being totally ridiculous, and then trying to say that they're above criticism, it's all misinformation, look no further than the Democrats. I would like the video to be played, because I'm sure that Jacoby will try to spin it into something it's not. But this, Jacoby, is exactly the reason why people are critical of FEMA and critical of the Democrats. Can you play the video, please?
Let them play the video.
Sparked a few things in my mind, thinking about preparedness and how you said, LGBTQIA people and people who have been disadvantaged already are struggling. They already have their own things to deal with. So you add a disaster on top of that. It's just compounding on itself. And I think that is maybe the why we're having these discussions, is because it isn't being talked about. It isn't being socialized. We're not paying attention to this community. Thank you so much. Maggie.
Thank you. There are a couple of things that are intersecting in my mind here. One of them is the culture of emergency management as an organization, as an industry in the United States specifically, not abroad. This has, and my cat sometimes does this, she gets really loud suddenly, so you'll have to just allow for the little meowing in the background. The shift that we're seeing right now is a shift in emergency management from utilitarian principles where everything is designed for the greatest good for the greatest amount of people to disaster equity. But we have to do more, right? And so this topic is intersecting, I think, with a number of other topics where we have to look at policies and understand to what extent they have disadvantaged communities that had less assets, communities that had pre-existing vulnerabilities in accessing disaster-related recovery supports.
So come on, Jacoby, tell us all about disaster equity. What we need to equalise things is we should make sure that white people get hurt more than blacks
You're
and
rambling on now.
LGBTQ people, because that way you've got equity. Let's hear it.
You're rambling on
Yeah,
now.
please help me out. Yeah, I love it. I'd like to see my IQ level drop.
Jack, you can't hear me if you're talking. So just to point out, the minority communities that live in lower income housing, which is where most minority communities are due to the fact of redlining and all the histrionics in this nation, they have to deal with that situation. So those communities themselves are hit harder by these disasters, COVID, so on and so forth. That's why
Dave was talking about the LGBTQ community, right? Why did you address that one?
You're over-talking me. You don't like the facts, so you're over-talking me.
I don't like the
So for example, I know my stuff because I live here, and I live.
You're the dude that couldn't even work out what an average was versus a mean.
You listen to Donald Trump. I get it. Your best buddy Joel, he tried to host some function for him. That's why he's getting sued by it. I know.
Stop with the personal attacks. Come on.
No, keep him coming. It's fine, mate. No problem.
So again,
you're a gem, baby.
I'm trying to be professional, but he keeps over talking me, and you haven't said a thing about that.
Oh, so Steve backstage doing this for an hour. That's being professional.
Let me finish. So again, if you look at the mortality rate of Black women versus all other women, you can see that the Black women's mortality rate is up higher. Why? Because of the lack of resources and health care. So therefore, these things are a reality. So when we're talking about the disaster recoveries and the disaster reliefs, and actually all these things that come into play around communities of color, including Hispanic, including any non-white individual that has a high, those communities tend to be more affected.
But not me, right? Because the classification's changed. Because I'm white now, according to America. I'm white. This is, if you're American, just have a good look. This is white. This is white right here.
I know the facts on this, Jack.
Can you get to the LGBTQ, please? Can you justify that first?
I'm trying to answer your question.
Have some health issues as well, and they have some health issues that are addressed through their community. That's a known fact.
It is a known fact that these things affect minority communities more so than they affect other communities due to the fact of where these communities are situated. They were lower income. Anybody can look up these facts and figures.
Can you get to the LGBTQ stuff, please?
So again, that is to answer your question. And then on top of that, take into account if we're talking about FEMA. I noticed how you didn't bring up the fact that there are actually in North Carolina right now, there are right-wing militias that are actually going.
Would you please address the LGBTQ stuff that I have brought up and specifically asked you about and reminded you about in this rambling answer of yours?
Stop. There are legitimate right-wing militias going after North Carolina.
Okay, so the answer is no. You're not going to address the issue I brought up with you. Okay, no problem. Thank you. Thanks for that. So the audience now knows that you were incapable of answering that. That's why you filibustered and changed the topic. Because you know as well as the rest of us do that it's absolutely absurd.
What's that, Jerry? Hold on a second.
Well, Mark, don't come to his defense. Don't come to his defense. He can do it himself. He can embarrass himself all by himself.
Let Rick go.
All right.
But are you saying that there aren't healthy?
Well, why do you want to go to Rick? If you want to go to Rick, Toby, is that you acknowledging that you were incapable of answering the question about the LGBTQ priority of FEMA management of emergencies? Is that correct?
You guys
lied way too much.
Circles. 10 minutes ago.
I lied too much. I just showed you the bloody video, mate.
Nick,
Jack,
can you
10
please
minutes
put
Stop
away-
accusing people of lying. Be professional, please.
All right. 10 minutes ago, Shaq asked a fun question. If you're conservative, do you get blackballed in Hollywood? Hollywood cares about two things. Are you easy to work with, and do people want to see your work? There are a ton of conservatives, and I looked it up, who get a ton of work. John Voight, a crazy conservative, gets hired all the time because he does good work, and he's probably easy to work with. Dennis Quaid does your work. Patricia, wait, why are you talking over me?
He's a great actor.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So Dennis Quaid, Patricia Heaton, Tom Selleck, Dwayne Johnson, all conservative, all get a ton of work. I can give you a bunch more. And, like Sandler, apparently, Vince Vaughn, Kurt Russell. And then when people there are people who have problems, like Roseanne Barr, super conservative, also super crazy, tough as hell to work with. So, yeah, she gets less work. Rob Schneider, super conservative, doesn't get a lot of work. People don't want to see his stuff too much. Russell Brand, super conservative, super problematic for being a sexual predator. So if you're cool and you're conservative, you're probably fine.
Come on now, please don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining, champ. The fact that there's a handful of people that are conservative that have managed to survive Hollywood is not indicative. Hang on, let me finish. It's not indicative. Shut up, Toby. Be quiet for a second. It's not indicative of all of Hollywood, and we know that. Secondly, many of the people that you mentioned, like Roseanne Barr, was never a conservative. She's not even a conservative now. She's a bit of a conspiracy theorist, and she hates being lied to, right? Russell Brand was married to Katy Perry. He hated Donald Trump, and he's changed his mind about that now. So what are we talking about? Okay, there are very, very few exceptions to the rule and an overall thing, and you don't see the conservatives jumping up to win an award and giving the audience a huge lecture. But I also just want to make note once again, the issue I brought up was about the ridiculous FEMA prioritization of things that most people don't think should be prioritized, such as the LGBTQ community. I've asked Toby to respond to it. He didn't do it. Mark tried to jump in to protect you, Toby. Couldn't do it. And then Rick changed the subject. Speaks volumes, guys. Speaks volumes. The problem is you wokesters who can't admit to Toby, you wokesters can't admit when you're dead wrong.
Just like Rick gave you an answer about the actors, you don't care because it doesn't fit your narrative.
Okay, so what? Rick, are you trying to claim that there is an equal distribution of conservatives versus progressives in Hollywood? Is that your claim? Of course not.
No, there are
right?
more.
Maybe the people that fund the movies, maybe they are. Maybe the camera people and the people that are treated like shit that work in the studios, maybe they're conservatives. But you want to tell me the people at the top? There's an equal distribution? Of course not.
No, I'm not claiming that.
That's not.
Of course you're not saying that. So just by you pointing out that me pointing that out is ridiculous.
And this is how it becomes very agitating and tiring. You asked a legitimate question saying,
that you have an answer.
Conservatives being muted? They were not. You were just proven wrong there. You asked me about the LGBTQ community or minorities and the
I didn't ask about minorities. I asked you specifically about the LGBT community, and I asked you several times during your rambling answer, and you refused to answer it.
This is the
Are
problem.
we in the Twilight Zone? Adam, am I making this up? Am I hallucinating? Did he refuse to answer it? Nick, did he refuse to answer it? Rick, did he refuse to answer it? Did I bring it up multiple times? Or are we like on a different planet?
You
from
talk
each other.
over people that don't listen. You were actually answered.
Toby,
and yes,
really quickly, Toby, I think what he's asking, because you brought up the race stuff and everything, is I think the video was talking about the health issues that deal with the LGBT community and how that was being handled by folks, and you did not address that yet. So if you will answer that,
I will address that. And if we are under some inclination that those in the LGBTQ community, QIA community, which have their own health issues, which also have a lower income value than many in the affluent communities, which I thought we had just understood how the affluent communities, which lean mostly on the Caucasian side of things, and the minority communities, and those which include the LGBTQIA community, lean in the lower income side of things in comparison across the board, which is a fact. Prove me wrong if you want to. So again, with those lower income communities, which have a higher precedent of being not only Black, Latino, LGBTQIA, these individuals have a higher need for FEMA than the more affluent communities. Hence the reason why even the Biltmore estate was just saying, don't focus on us, focus on those individuals around the community that need it more because we have more money. So when I point this out in terms of the monetary needs and the FEMA needs of these communities, I know, Shaq, you don't like hearing it because it doesn't fit your narrative.
No, because you're full of shit. That's why I don't like hearing.
I do want to thank Chitobi for his comments, but I totally disagree with them, and we'll see you next week.
Why does it people look after the